Hello, everyone. It's just me and Fox again. So we've decided to come up with a new name that I just made up about 10 minutes ago. It's called The Fox and the Profound. Uh,
Ugh.
Pretty lame, and Fox loves it already. It's it's not really supposed to be like I'm the profound one and Fox is the Fox one. It's really supposed to be like Fox is here, and also we're gonna try to say profound things. So, just in case people thought I was being a little too full of myself, I'm not quite being as full of myself as you might have thought. Fox, save me from this intro.
Well, he really didn't run this name before before we came on. So I'd just like to clarify, I had nothing to do with it. As much as you want to defend yourself, it really comes across as you being the profound one. But, you are the creator, so I guess you're the ruler. On that note, let's jump right in, right?
Yeah, let's do it. So,
So,
yeah, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
All right.
We discussed. No, I'm going for it now. Great start. We talked about the Olympic trials, and now that the trials are over, we wanted to, see where we went wrong because we did not get a lot right. And we're going to go in order of the events, how they were run, their final. So we'll start with the 10K. It was a very interesting race. Galen Rupp sort of took control of it and established he was going. And there was a lot of speculation that he did that to bring his teammate along in Eric Jenkins. That did not work. The other two members that will represent the U.S. in Rio for the 10K are Shadrach Kipchirchir and Leonard Courier. It's not a great name to pronounce. And I think the story of the race was not who went, but who didn't finish and who didn't go. The big names like Hassan Mead, Jenkins didn't finish the race. Bernard Lagat, they did not cross the finish line. And obviously guys like Ben True didn't make the team. Did he even finish the race? I don't think he finished the race either.
He finished. He just didn't run fast at all.
Yeah, he was in 11th. So not the strongest team per se. Is there a glimmer of hope, Jarrett?
Well, I mean, we have the defending Olympic silver medalist on our team, and I mean, maybe he's not quite as sharp as he was in 2012, which was kind of like a perfect circumstances for him to get on the medal stand, but he's still been a top 5 or so guy in the last 3 global championships at 10,000 meters. His speed isn't quite there, but his strength is definitely there. He just put in a surge in the middle of this race, broke open the field, came back, and then put in another surge, and barely anybody could hang with him. Looked like he might have been struggling a little bit with a lap to go. Then he just turns on the jets, ends up winning this race by 6 seconds, which was all pretty much in the last 200 meters. I mean, that's still our guy. We haven't had a real medal contender besides Rupp in the 10K anyway recently. So I think this team's just as good as some of our teams of the past.
Yeah, I think that really speaks to the US's ability in the 10K more than it speaks about this team. I thought it was interesting that the two U.S. Army runners made the team. It sort of set the trend for the rest of the trials as far as distance went. Obviously, the U.S. sent 4 soldiers. We'll get more into that later. I'm sort of disappointed. We talked about it when we first did this show. We wanted to talk about their transition. Obviously, in all the events, we're sort of seeing out with the old, in with the new. And you got guys like Hassan Mead, Eric Jenkins in this event who, sort of seem like the next wave for the US in the 10K. And they really didn't show up, which is unfortunate. So we really won't have that measuring stick in the 10K at least for how they measure up against guys like Rupp. But for now, Rupp is, he's probably the best chance we have at a medal. But I said Kipchirchir would be a factor. I did not see him making a team. So good for the U.S. Army, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, those guys came to play. It was hot. It was, a surgy race, and kind of was the theme, like you said, the theme of the week. These guys showed up in big races. Some of these guys ran big PRs. They beat guys who have faster PRs. I just think that speaks to, a level of toughness that maybe comes from the U.S. Army, maybe comes from somewhere else. But, you know, ultimately, you got to show up on race day. And that's what these guys did. And that's what a lot of the other favorites didn't do.
All right. Yep. So I guess on that note, we should move on to the 800. Two guys that we thought would make the team, Murphy and Berrien, sealed their spot. And then Charles Jock, who I don't think anybody in the world had making the Olympic team, snuck in for third. What are your storylines for the half mile?
Well, I think, first of all, this was a pretty big moment for Clayton. We had talked about him as a factor, and obviously you guys more so than me had been pushing him as a 143 type guy. And it just proved that win against Berrien wasn't just some type of fluke. He beat him after 3 rounds. He looked pretty good doing it. And he looks like potentially now we have 2 medal contenders maybe in Rio if everything breaks right. The 800 is really deep. It's a really fluky event. But we have 2 guys who on the right day could make things interesting and get in the final.
Yeah, I think Murphy is probably the safer bet to get to the final. Obviously, he's very strong, very poised runner, which is very surprising considering he's my age. He really looks good over the last, 200, 100 meters. In the semifinal, we were both saying, get in position, and then he closed it so well. And he won that semifinal. He ended up winning the final too. So he's got a really good head. I don't know how explosive he is. And if, a guy like Radish is out front running 141, is Murphy that 143 guy? Because, he only ran 144.7 in the final. And Boris Berrien has, we keep going back to this trouble with rounds. So we'll see if that comes into play again in Rio. But we do know he's very, very fast. He didn't really get tested to, put out a PR performance to make the team. I still think he can run faster. And if he's in that final, I think he's probably more of a factor than Murphy, given what we've seen. But, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, we discussed it a little bit before getting on air. We both think that Berrien's still probably the better shot at a medal out of the 2. I really liked what I saw from him in the rounds, honestly. I liked that he just ran aggressively and went out pretty hard, and because that's just the way he runs. He can't try to run like a sprinter. I mean, or sorry, like a kicker. He's got to get out hard and then hold on and break everybody else down for that finish stretch. Take no chances. What's interesting that we didn't talk about, this was a 9-person final because of the Engels edition / Shaq Walker bump, and as a result of that, they didn't start it in lanes like they usually start the 800. They started from a waterfall start. Berrien didn't get out to the front at the beginning of the race, which he probably would have done from the, if they all started in lanes. Can't say that for sure, but if he gets to the front, he takes control earlier in the race, maybe goes out a little bit faster, puts more of a gap on Murphy. I mean, Murphy was an 8th at 400 meters. So if Berrien gets to the front, just makes it a little bit faster, maybe Murphy can't catch him at the end.
Yeah, Berrien didn't look like he was going for the win. Once he was comfortable in position to make the team, I think, he was fine with coming in second. If he had really wanted to win that race, I think he wins that race. It's hard to say that a guy gave up a national championship, but I don't really see him kicking himself over that loss. You brought up Shaq Walker, and we talked about him being an X factor. And when I watched that semifinal, I thought he should have made it through. If they sent Engels through, my position was Walker got interfered with as well. And with Charles Jock making the team, you sort of wonder if Shaq Walker is in there, because 2 days later he won the 800 that Nick Simmons had. Could he have made that team in front of Charles Jock? Because Charles Jock, good for him for making the team, but he just ran 148 and came in dead last in a race out in Europe. And I have a hard time believing that he's a better runner than Sawinski. Loxham obviously didn't come through in the final, but I still like him. And Walker looked really good in the first round, and then the first 7/8 or however long it was in the semifinal. So I sort of have an inkling if he's in that race, he would have been able to mix it up. And if I'm Shaq Walker, I sort of feel like I'm robbed.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, Engels ended up getting fourth in
Yeah.
that final, and it really that race for Engels kind of catapulted his whole weekend because then he had an awesome 1500 as well. So
Yeah.
he really had quite the trials, and all kind of springboarded from this. I'll say this about Jock. I certainly didn't expect him to make the team. I thought he looked better last year. He did just run 148, but it's different right after you've made the Olympic team. You look at the guys who've run fast in Europe so far. You look at Ryan Hill dropped to 330, 335. He missed the 5K team. He had a little extra motivation as opposed to some other guys who, and Andy Bayer ran really fast as well in the steeple. You know, those are guys that had hard breaks in their events. Jock's in a different position mentally, so I'm not ready to just necessarily say, you know, he's going to just bomb out in the Olympics. He's made a world championship team before. He's an NCAA champion. I think he's a good runner, but we didn't expect this result because he hasn't had the best season this year. But he's had
Yeah.
great seasons in the past.
Yeah, and I think the other guy we need to talk about is Dwayne Solomon.
Mm-hmm.
He had that first round, and he just pulled up at it, and it didn't look like he was hurt, didn't look like he was tired. It looked like he thought he was safe. And as a veteran, you know, he's past 30. He's a guy who's the second fastest American of all time. You cannot do that. And he's clearly in shape. He ran 145 a couple days ago, 3 days ago. So it wasn't a tired thing. It was a boneheaded move. And, you know, I think he's another guy. You know, if he makes it through the semifinal, maybe he mixes it up in the final, given, you know, he's in good shape. And it was really, really surprising for me to see that a guy with that much under his belt do something so amateur.
Yeah, that when that happened, I mean, talk about, you know, we've said this a lot, but setting the tone for things to come. I mean, I thought this was one of the more crazy U.S. championships that I can remember.
Yeah.
And watching Solomon go out in the very first race that I watched of the entire championships was just unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess we can use that to segue into the steeplechase, which for me was the most dramatic race of the weekend. Evan Yeager took it unsurprisingly, but what happened behind him was nothing short of, you know, reality TV as far as track and field goes.
Yeah, I mean, Evan looks pretty good. He was kind of expected to win, but then madness behind him at the end. His training partner, Andy Bayer, looked like he was about to make the team, then had a pretty rough final stretch, comes off the last barrier. Kabeni also in a great position to potentially make the team, trips off the water barrier there, and Hillary Bohr from the U.S. Army comes out of nowhere to make the team in second. Cabral comes back from left for dead to get third, and that's your team.
Yeah, it's Hillary Bohr obviously continuing the trend of strong army runners, or soldiers, I guess we can call them. That's more efficient. And he looked really solid. So if he has that sort of close, you know, maybe he's a guy who can make the final, maybe mix it up. And then Don Cabral, a guy who made the finals 4 years ago, really, really did not look good. And you'd sort of think, you know, Kabeni falls, Cabral sort of has to hurdle him. Was that, you know, the shot in the arm he needed to, you know, close on Bayer those last 100 meters? I was surprised by Hewling and Leslie not being factors. You know, they were sort of expected to be right there. And I honestly thought Cabral, you know, Yeager only ran 8:22. Cabral has that in his locker. He's run 8:13. Uh, I I know it was a month away, but I sort of question his fitness and whether he'll be able to repeat his performance of making the final in Rio.
Yeah, I think Bohr's really interesting for Rio because he was kind of gaining on Jager, I thought, at the end of the race. He ran 62 for the last lap. He had the fastest last lap split in the entire field, went from fifth to second on that last lap. And I was just really impressed by the way this guy closed. He ran a PR in the final to make the team. So I know that there was arguably better guys who are off the team, but this guy came through in the biggest moment, peaking at the right moment. And maybe some guys were looking past this race and towards the Olympics. I know that Hewling and Jager and the Bowerman Track Club, I heard they were going back up to Portland in between races to get in more training, which I mean seems a little crazy to me. That's what I read. So maybe they were just looking past this race, and you have to take every race, individually, especially when it's for an Olympic team and everybody's gunning for it.
Yeah. It's easy for us to speculate, but I'm sure the coaches of, or Cabral specifically, they know what they're doing. You have to assume he comes ready to show his stuff in Rio. And I guess with that, we'll go into another crazy race, the 5K. Obviously, there was some drama there as well.
Yeah, the 5K just I went 0 for 3, I believe, with my picks for that one. I think I had Heath, Hill, and True in some order, probably Hill winning, and none of those guys made the team. None of them were in the top 4. As Bernard Lagat, the ageless wonder, gets first. Hassan Mead looks miserable in the 10K, comes back, gets second. Paul Chalemo, third from the U.S. Army. Talk a little bit about this race because it was a pretty crazy race.
So obviously, Rupp sort of figured he could do the same thing he did in the 10K. He made that surge. He had a sizable lead with a bell lap, and this is a guy who we trust the kick. If he's at first bell, it's like, okay, safest thing in the world, and he split a 60, and it looked like he was not moving. And that really speaks to what Bernard Lagat still has in his legs, closing in 52. And, it wasn't a blistering pace, but closing, 52 for a 13:35, that's no joke. And I think what's really, really interesting is him, Mead, and Jenkins, who finished 4th, they look terrible. They look terrible in the 10K. I don't know if it was the heat or the distance, but if you had told me that Bernard Lagat, at 41 years old, would be able to rebound from such a bad race to win it, I would have laughed at you. And for him to come back, it says a lot about his character. It says a lot about his training. It says a lot about his mental forte, I'd say, or fortitude. And there's no words to describe him other than ageless. Hassan Mead is the guy I'm a big fan of. It was good to see him make the team. I think everybody expected him to make the 10K team. For him to rebound is, shows a lot of maturity for a guy who, not that old. And Chalimo, the 4th and final soldier, to, surprise at the U.S. Olympic trials. He had a really strong college career. Obviously, those soldiers are doing something right. And Eric Jenkins, a young guy, a guy I said would contend in the 5K, makes me look good. Unfortunately, I said if Rupp didn't make the team, he would make the team. But Rupp didn't, he didn't. And then I think maybe the most disappointing performance at trials was Ben True. Guy who runs 3:36, 13:04, 13:02, however fast he ran at Peyton Jordan, and does not make either team.
Yeah, I just think some guys ran the 10K that, hindsight's 2020, obviously, but, Jenkins missed the team by 0.06, and he had that 10K. I mean, not the full 10K, but that 10K effort in his body. True was 5th. He missed the team by about half a second as well. And you just wonder, if these guys hadn't run the 10K, would the final of the 5K been different? It's hard to say because the 10K team certainly looked easier on paper to me. But, nothing is given at the Olympic trials, I guess.
Yeah, I think just playing devil's advocate, Ryan Hill was fresh and he finished 6th.
Right.
So it was just one of those races. It was a weird 10 days. in Track Town. I don't think anybody could predict what happened in any of these events, and the 5K was no different. Once again, with Legat, it was great to see him represent, do what he did, but I really wanted to see some of these young guys. I don't think anybody on this team has, you know, the talent to medal in Rio. I mean, the 5K is a tough event in the world right now. It's always going to be a tough event. And if anybody's going to do anything, I have to think it's Son Mead. He ran 13:04 at pre, but you sort of look at these three guys and it's like hope for the best. Although closing in 52 is closing in 52.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you look at championship 5Ks, they are usually slower paced, which opens the door for a faster kick. If you can close in 52 seconds, then you're going to be right there in the Olympic final, the last 400 meters, if you're in a good position. And Legat's very good tactically. He's medaled at international championships before. If he can close in 52 seconds at the Olympics, I mean, he's going to be right there with anybody in the world. So, I mean, and the other guys, they ran a similar time, and 13:35, like we said, isn't, that's not that slow for a championship race. I think the Olympic final last year was maybe in the 13:40s even, or not last year, last time. So I think that these guys aren't the traditional names that we have seen at the top of the U.S. standings per se, but the fact that they ran that race that we just saw, closing in 53 seconds in a 13:30s race, I don't see why they can't get to the finals and then at least be in the mix. There's so many good African 5K runners that no matter who we had on the team, it was going to be hard to get a medal. So these guys, I think, are just as good as anybody else we could have had, honestly. Hill maybe would have been better, but, these guys are great, too.
Yep, and at the very least, it was a very, very exciting race to watch. That last 400 even had the guys at my office talking, and they called him Galen Roth because his last 400 was rough. I'd like to see them run a 60, though. All right, and that'll get it. That's a good one. I feel pretty good about that joke.
Yeah, nice. Profound.
Yeah. On to the last event, maybe the most logical result of the weekend, I guess you could say, with Centro, Andrews, and Blankenship, three of the four guys that I think everybody had making the team. Do you want to talk about what happened in this final?
So it was an interesting race because most of the guys in the final did not have the Olympic A standard. So if they didn't run 3:36.2 or faster, they weren't going to the Olympics no matter what place they were in. So Jordan McNamara, who'd been pretty public about wanting the pace to be fast, took it out. Isaac Yorks did a really great job bringing it through. But at the end, ultimately, the cream rose to the top, so to speak, and we got a big kickers battle at the end. Centrowitz just looking amazingly smooth, as always, really. But this was a fast race. This was a Olympic trials record, I believe, for 1500. He ran 3:34.09 to run away with it. And then Blankenship fought off Manzano in the last straight. I thought for sure Leo was going to come by, make another team like he seems to always do. And Blankenship found that other gear and just gutted it out for third.
Yeah, you could definitely see the age in Leo Manzano. 2, 3, 4 years ago, he's making that team. He was in position, and he's got a lot of miles on those tires. And good for Blankenship. He's another feel-good story. Everybody talks about Barry, and he had this meteoric rise. But Ben Blankenship was a guy who was working construction. And for him to make an Olympic team is a really good story. But the two guys at the top, Centro and Robbie Andrews, they both look fantastic. Centro, obviously, but Andrews, we know he can run fast, we know he can kick, but he did it all in this race, He got into a good position. I think he was, in fifth place at the Bell Lap, and he just pulled away. To close as well as he did, running 3:34, I think, says a lot about, where he is as a runner and how far he's come. And Centro, just looked unbeatable. And obviously, running against these guys isn't the same as running against, guys like Suleiman, Kiprop, but he just looked like he could win any way he wanted to.
Yeah. I mean, he was easily the best runner in this field. He looks like a medal contender again. He's been far up there in the past. He got the bronze in 2011, fourth in 2012, and second in 2013. 2015, he wasn't quite as high up there. This year, maybe coming back with a little redemption, especially after just missing that Olympic medal. I'm sure he wants it. He's the guy who I think is really great through the rounds. If you look at his PR, it's a 3:30, which is very strong, but a lot of the other top guys in the world consistently can run that faster in the right setup race. But Centro gets better with the rounds. He's a stronger runner, and I think that plays a big part of it, and he's obviously really strong tactically. But closing in 53 for a 3:34.09 race is no joke, and it looks like he's hopefully only getting started because I know he's had some injury problems, and hopefully he can have a nice build-up going into the Olympics and continue to drop time because this was an impressive race.
Yeah, not only did he run, 3:34.0, he closed in 53. The manner in which he did it, it looked simply effortless. And I think what Centro has that a lot of these other Americans don't have is he has the poise, but he has swagger. He gets on the big stage, and it's just like he belongs there. The other Americans, it's like, oh, I'm running with these Africans. And for Centro, he's just one of them. He's at that elite. He has that swagger, and I think he has to go in to come in fourth at the Olympics. That hurts. And then for him last year to not have that strong showing like we're used to, I think he's coming back with a vengeance, and he is definitely our best bet at a medal. He's just so strong. He's so tactically sound, and he's really a really great face for the sport, I think.
Yeah, I think he's fun. I mean, I think he's fun to watch.
Yeah.
Obviously, Robbie's my favorite. I tried not to go in too much on him, but he obviously had a great race. I'm hoping that he can make the final in Rio. And then who knows? Sometimes you can just ride that final and have something good happen. But he almost ran his PR in the finals, closing in that 54. So he's getting there, and I think hopefully he'll be ready for Rio. So you mentioned something that I guess we could touch on now. You said Centro you think is the best chance for a medal for the Team USA on the distance side. Why do you think that, and who else do you think is up there?
Well, obviously Centro has the experience. Having that world silver medal, having come fourth at the Olympics, he's been there. He knows what's going to happen. He's run against these guys before, and he just looks so strong. He looked better than anybody else at trials, I think. Other than that, you have to think about, Jaeger running 8 flat. He didn't look like he was in 8 flat shape. Once again, you have to trust the coaching. They're coaches for a reason. He's another guy who's been there, who's, expected to compete. And I guess, the silver bullet, I would assume, is Legat. Closing in 52 for 13:35 is elite. He's up there in age, but he also has that experience. Maybe not in the 5K for the U.S., but experience nonetheless. So obviously these races are going to be tactical. Everybody's gunning for the medal, and you want guys who have been there before. And I think experience is a big key as far as winning a medal, which is why I wanted to see some of these younger guys get the experience now so they can come back in 4 years. But, if those 3 guys can perform well, I think it'll reflect very well on the U.S.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got high hopes for Evan. I know he didn't look good at the trials. We kind of discussed that already, but I'm hoping that, maybe he's looking past this and looking towards Rio as his ultimate goal, knowing that he can kind of coast a little bit and still get by. I think that the key is, I don't know if there's a ton of other people that are on his level in the steeple outside of Kenya. And Kenya can only send 3 to the Olympics. He's run 8 flat, which is an incredible time. If he can just, hang tough and have a kick, or maybe if he can run a gutsy race, from the front and make things interesting. I think that he's got a really good chance to get on the medal stand. He's got to be hungry after the last couple of years of disappointment, being such a medal hopeful for us. And I think it would be really big for U.S. running to have a steeplechaser medal at the Olympics. That'd be pretty big.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously we talked a lot about guys who made the team. I think it's worth talking about a few guys who didn't make the team. In the 1500 specifically, Colby Alexander was, sort of the darling. We talked about, he's so close to the standard. Is he going to go for it? And if so, can he make the team? And for me, it was really disappointing in this 1500-meter final. He had the opportunity to hit the standard and make the team. The race sort of, if it was going to happen, it was going to happen in that final. And for him to finish 7th is really disappointing for me. And somebody who we talked about earlier who had just an incredible performance was Craig Engels. Sort of reminds me of Clayton Murphy last year, where nobody's really expected him to make through the rounds and, be in that position in the finals. And he did it not once but twice. That's 6 races over the span of like 10 days. That's incredible. And he was right there both times. And he's still going to be back at Ole Miss. So we saw Clayton Murphy use, what he got at the U.S. Championships last year, and that springboarded him to a national title. I expect Craig Engels to have a similar sort of rise on the track and be, dominant in the NCAA next year.
Yeah, his confidence has to be sky high after this. I mean, he had one heck of a weekend, and I think you hit the nail on the head with the Clayton Murphy comparison. We talked about it a little bit when we were doing our preview, how we said Clayton ended up on the team, and he kind of came from nowhere to make that team. And Engels really was, the next logical person in the 800 now to just come out of nowhere and get 4th. The guy that I wanted to mention, Isaiah Harris from Penn State, as just a freshman in the U.S. final, really ran a gutsy race, was in a good position with even 100 meters to go.
Yeah.
He didn't have that extra gear, but after 3 rounds as a freshman, when coming into this year, I mean, I don't know exactly what his times were in high school, but I'm sure he was nowhere near the 146, 145 realm that he got to at the end. So this was completely uncharted territory for him this season. Looks like a pretty bright future for him.
Yeah, and he'll be teaming up with Michael Slikowski. Obviously, he's losing a training partner in Kidder, but Sligowski is somebody who sort of reminds me of Kidder. They have the 800 speed, obviously, have the 1500 chops. So it'll be really nice to see him progress. And I'm sure he's, just ecstatic that Donovan Brazier made the choice to go pro.
Yeah, that's true. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the next generation. If maybe, this year obviously wasn't the year for that, as we discussed, but there's still so much young talent that got a little bit of a taste for USA's, like Brazier, like Harris. You mentioned Sligowski, who I'm very high on. I don't know if I'm on record on video of saying that I think he's going to get the collegiate 1K record next year, but now I am. And Drew Hunter, obviously, who also turned pro. What did you think, real quick, Drew Hunter turning pro? How'd you feel about that?
I would have trained with Ezra Cheserek for a year, try to win a national title in cross country, see what I can do with, the best collegiate distance runner of this recent memory. Maybe held off a little bit, but, I'm sure he's talented enough and he's going to get the coaching to have a very successful career. Me personally, I like the collegiate scene. I would have liked to see him duke it out with guys like Fisher and McGorty for a couple of years and, partner up with Ches. But I'm excited to see what he can do as a pro. So,
yeah, I'm definitely going to miss him in the NCAA. I think it would have been really fun to have him back with Fisher and everybody. But we saw when Alan Webb tried to go to college, there's so much pressure, so much expectation, and ended up kind of all crumbling for him. And he ended up going pro, and then he had a pretty successful career, American record holder in the mile.
Yeah, he's okay.
So he ended up doing all right. And Hunter's still getting a free education thanks to his sponsors. So I think
my only concern is he did join Adidas. He'll be training with the likes of Robbie Andrews and Christian Serratos, who are more 1500 runners. Obviously, he has talent at that range, running 357 indoors. We saw him run sub 4 3 times, I think, as a high schooler. But I think everybody who follows running wants to see what he can do in a 5K. And I would like to see him go to a more distance oriented training group. That said, you have to assume him and whoever is advising him on these choices has his best interest in mind. So it's hard to fault him not knowing the inside details of what's going to happen.
Yeah, they've always seemed to have a pretty long view of his training, and they've talked about his 2 mile potential. And I think maybe if he didn't have sickness that held him out the second half of this year, then we could have seen something indicating his 5K potential. But it's a good time to be a young U.S. distance runner. There's a lot of talent.
Future is bright. Look no further than the 200 with Lyles and Norman, right?
That was fun. That was really exciting. I was like legitimately excited about that, and I don't usually get excited about sprints.
All right, that's all I got. What about you?
I mean, no more logical place to end than the 200 on this.
Right. All right. I'm sure our many viewers will enjoy this.
All right. Well, thank you to everyone for watching. Oscars Thursday night, 8:30 back here. Might just be me presenting all 17 awards. So get your popcorn ready. Goodbye.
There we go.